Greetings, you're listening to Guiding Stars Evolutionary Astrology Radio. This is your host, Kristin Fontana. Guiding Stars is an interactive, soul-centered astrology talk show using the symbolic language of evolutionary astrology to enlighten and empower you on this journey. I'm here today with Ari Moshe, and we are discussing Chiron in Scorpio, or the 8th house, and we are re-recording this, so apologies to those who caught us the first time. We had some technical difficulties with sound, but we're going for a take 2, and hey, it's going to be worth the ride for sure. We're going Scorpio style, so what's not worth that ride, right, Ari? Let's go.
Yeah, we get to do Scorpio twice, which is fun, so great. Actually, that first class was my favorite. Like, that was just, I loved it, so let's see how this one goes.
I think, it was more fun for us than some of those who are listening because my microphone was off kilter, I would say. But yeah, it was great to be together with you, Ari. It was just to share a physical live space to do this work and to go deep with Scorpio, Chiron and Scorpio. That's got to be the deepest place for it. Although Chiron is deep in any sign, but Scorpio is about really getting to the bottom of something, and that can just be penetratingly powerful. So how would you like to start this show? I'll let you take it from here. And
So yeah, let's just introduce, in general, Chiron and Scorpio, and we'll look at some charts.
Sounds great.
So when we look at the Scorpio archetype and the 8th house, we're looking at the principle of evolution. And it teaches us that everything that comes will also go. Everything's impermanent. And so we have within the 8th house the experience where consciousness is facing its deepest psychological limitations, where we have the greatest fear of abandonment, fear of betrayal. It's where we will thus tend to hold on to forms of security, create attachments, addictions, and form relationship with all kinds of things. Now, in forming these relationships, there's a sense of, okay, I have this drug, or I have this person, I have this, there's a quality of experiencing a sense of fulfillment that comes through these relationships. But there's also this piece that everything that's in our life is impermanent. Everything is ephemeral. So, 8th house Scorpio is marriage, and it's divorce, and it's death, and it's excrement. So there's this principle of being able to engage our desires, our attractions, right? What we're drawn to, who we're drawn to, where we need oftentimes to claim a deeper thread of empowerment and be able to say, okay, I'm going to move into this new phase. 8th house is metamorphosis. So the caterpillar plays out its phase, and then it has to move into the chrysalis, the darkness, and then become a butterfly. So we learn how to navigate these things, but ultimately there's a wisdom that we learn in the 8th house, which is you have to let go at some point, which is another way of saying we have to be able to integrate and internalize that whatever was outside ultimately is pointing to a fundamental power and wholeness that exists on the inside. And when we work through these Scorpio 8th house phases in our life, we ultimately develop a greater resilience, an ability to live through life's changes, live through the impermanence, which means loving fully, showing up fully, giving fully, engaging fully, but also knowing we really can't hold on. Otherwise, we can really get stuck in this psychology of jadedness, mistrust, and that can lead to some really dark psychologies, really dark behaviors, revenge, sort of a non-ending broodiness and anger and resentment towards others, towards life. And that's the dark side of the 8th house Scorpio, where from a deep sense of victimization, which really roots to not knowing our own power, not being connected with our ability to consciously focus our attention towards what is necessary in order to evolve. How can I take full responsibility for my life experiences and thus make conscious choices relative to what life is presenting now? That's the empowerment. And when we don't do that, when we're in the consciousness of victimization, it fundamentally says we believe ourselves to be a victim to life and that there's no potential for growth. We want things to be a certain way, and we're not willing to make our own changes. So that can lead to getting involved in some pretty dark stuff. Now, when we put Chiron in the 8th house, we're looking at the archetype of the sacred wound, the wounded healer, the place where we carry the deepest medicine. And so there will have been peak experiences within this soul's history that point to where this soul may have experienced a deep loss, abandonment, betrayal, facing the depths of darkness, where there can be a woundedness in feeling and believing oneself to be utterly broken in this dramatic despair of emptiness and lostness and just infinite black eyeshadow, no ending to the despair. And as per Chiron, there is such a strong tendency for it to feel like an absolute impairment. And we can become so identified with that we just live in this darkness. And this can also be where a soul creates wounding for others, manipulates, takes advantage of others from a deeply rooted sense of their own lostness, acting from that place in a way that hurts other people. But this Chiron in Scorpio can really manifest as a soul that's gone through their transmutation. You know, I think of the Alex, I should have actually shared a picture of this, but there's the Alex Gray painting of the wounded healer. And it's like a 3-part series where there's like the dismemberment phase and all the limbs are all over the place. It's like perfect Scorpio. And then like, no, the first phase is like the agony, like,
Right.
Oh, you can feel it. Second phase is the dismemberment. Third phase is the I kind of cry when I think about it. The wounded healer, you know, walking with the catechist, is that the right word? The staff, the snake, up the hill, you know, and there's like this beautiful message in that. And so that's what the Scorpio 8th house Chiron's all about. Someone that's ultimately what's Chiron. Chiron is really on it. We how vulnerable is our own pain in the face here of our own darkness, our own obsessions, our own addictions, where we can't let go, where we feel perpetually hurt, abandoned, wounded, betrayed, resentful. We actually make medicine out of it because we need it. And we'll get to share some examples of that as we go along. Anything else that you want to share to this?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of the things I was thinking about when you were talking is about the fact that with Scorpio connects to death, right? And so the wound can be so dark, so deep that the soul will feel like it just wants to die, or that it feels like death itself, right? The wound itself feels like death, or some part of you is dying because of the wound that you're experiencing. And remembering that, you know, involution must occur before evolution can happen. So there is a dying away of something so you can be reborn into something better. And it is really about reaching the very bowels of this archetype, of this wound, of the bowels of your soul. I mean, it is really about reaching the bottom. And you have to reach the very bottom before you can then emerge stronger and clear and better for it. It's kind of like if you haven't reached the bottom of a situation where there's been a betrayal, you haven't reached the very bottom of it. There's still stuff beneath it. There's still stuff that hasn't been exposed or unearthed. It's still there. The wound, you can be re-wounded if you haven't, and for the same reason, if you haven't really reached the bottom of it. And so that's why this particular placement of Chiron is so intense. And of course, as you mentioned, it is also an area where souls with this signature can wound others. And just the area that the kind of the shadow, dark magic kind of energy that people can get drawn into. There's like a temptation or an addiction to it, to reach that kind of, or to go into those spaces of power. Yeah. What it's all about. You're feeling drawn into that space. And so not everybody with this archetype, Chiron and Scorpio, is going to go there, but people who have it certainly can. So not all side or this signature doesn't, like, what do they say? It doesn't fit everybody. One size does not fit all, as I was trying to say. So it's just like being a Scorpio sun. Every Scorpio sun isn't the same, right? I always get this, with writing a weekly forecast, and you're writing to, millions of people with that archetype. Not everyone's going to have that particular experience. So it's important to take this signature in the context of the entire chart.
Beautiful. I love what you said about you need to get to the bottom of it before you can transmute it. I mean, it's like such a literal thing. Like, we have to feel our shadow before we can work with it. Otherwise, we won't be able to work with it. And it's like the same thing with like regeneration of land or compost. Like the very most base phase of excrement, right? That has to happen first before it can be broken down. But you can't make soil if you're not going to poop. So there's just like a very biological, fundamental truth to the Scorpio archetype, which says the messy, the mucky is necessarily a part of the experience.
Mm-hmm.
All right, shall we move on to the first chart?
I wanted to share something. I hope it's okay to share, but I think it's important for the teaching. On our last show, and my voice wasn't coming through clearly, but I was commenting about the fact that the founder of EA, Jeff Green, has Chiron and Scorpio in the 12th house. And the 12th house is a Pisces house, and he has a Pisces moon. So there's this natural innocence in his life about who he had extended his trust to, kind of believing the good and the God in others, hoping, really energizing the spirit of their potential, and has been, over and over and over was wounded and betrayed by people he extended his trust to and toward. And one of the things he told me a long time ago was that over time, when he's come through something, because of course the veil goes up in all of us, even though he has a very powerful lens and consciousness and ability to see things that most people can't, is that he would be shown through dream more of the story, the stuff he couldn't see after the fact. Chiron in the 12th house in Scorpio. And it would just bring him to his knees. What was really happening? Knowing what he knew. Yeah, brutal. And one of the things he used to call himself was an emotional chump, because he really wanted to believe in that soul, maybe this time. And so it was devastating, because the movies would just play in his dream over and over and over and over. Just the degree of despair or humiliation or grief that he would experience, thinking somebody was somebody that they were not. Chiron in the 12th, in Scorpio. And so what this was doing for him was kind of rubbing his nose in it. So he never did that again. So he never was able to see people clearly, full all the time, just this, because there's this tendency to, again, that rose-colored glasses kind of tendency, the natural innocence, within his soul that wanted to believe things could be different. So even someone at that stage of evolution, still experiencing that wound, through dream, 12th house, over and over, even after it was long done over.
Beautiful.
Painful. And if you think about it too, last point is that Chiron is in the 12th house, almost the ascendant. So it's something that is coming full circle, right? 12th house, finishing, finalizing. All right.
Cool. And that's another thing about Chiron, is that masochism piece. And Chiron in Scorpio, or the 8th house, there can be two expressions of masochism. One getting involved in facing the darkness beyond your capacity to actually integrate it, and that becoming its own wounding experience. The other is doing work in the world where you're going to be exposed to darkness, but if you're in touch with your own pain, that becomes your own healing as well. So it's uncomfortable, but there's healing that happens in it, and there's medicine that's shared as well.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So on a light note, let's look at Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah, that's a good place to start.
You want to go for it?
Yeah, I do. So let me see here. Before we get into the chart, everybody knows what a guitar legend this guy is. And he says, if you want to be a rock star or just be famous, then run down the street naked. You'll make the news or something. But if you want music to be your livelihood, then play, play, and play. And eventually you'll get to where you want to be. I don't really know about that for everybody. Right? Not everybody can be as good as he is with the guitar. But, it reflects the efforts, that he's making to master his craft. Play, play, play. Look at that Saturn in the 6th house, retrograde in Gemini, and running down the street naked, like creating shocks in people's face with Mars and Scorpio in the 11th house, right? So anyway, I just love that. And he was a master musician and, took things all the way Scorpio style. I mean, just the intense way that he played the guitar. I mean, there's so much written about him that, his presence changed music. Rock and roll was never the same after Jimi Hendrix. It kind of raised the bar, took things to this maximum point, and showed everybody what it could be, what you could do with this instrument. And so that 8th house Chiron, of course, his fame, Leo in the 8th house in particular, this powerful fame that he had, all the people, all the women in love with him, what he probably did with all of that. Of course, we know a lot of what he did with all of that, very indiscriminate, I think, with some of his choices. But, the people fawning all over him, the people he might have hurt and not been, doing things and not being responsible, perhaps, with the hearts of others because of that fame as a part of it too here. But anyway, just jumping in here, Ari, you can add some more thoughts on this if you like.
Sure. Well, we have Chiron in Leo on the North Node. So this is an energetic that is a very clear green light for the soul, something that's already been sort of integrated or worked on rather prior to this lifetime, and that the Chiron signature is a big part of this. So, Chiron and Leo in the 8th house is like dying to your eternal soul creative essence. On the North Node, this soul, think of his imprint in life. In many ways, he's an example of a soul that left a Chironic imprint. He brought forth a unique expression of creative intelligence that did not exist before.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that is unique to his own soul, but there must have been, because it's Chiron, a deep desire to go to the depths, perhaps a deep obsession, a deep soul level calling to her. And if you just kind of know a little bit about his life, even just watching him on stage, there was a total immersion in the vibration of his own soul intelligence. And this Leo is ruled by his sun in the 12th house, which is sort of the devotional, the ecstatic, giving himself to the spontaneous creative impulse in the moment. This chart really speaks so strongly to that, calling to transcend, calling to go deeper, calling to enter into the greatest depths. Scorpio 8th house can be single focused. And he has Mars in Mars in the 11th house in Scorpio, squaring the nodes. So we have sort of one of those repeated themes here, that this Mars squaring the North Node in Leo in the 8th with Chiron is a soul that was here to break out of the limitations that inhibit his own pure soul expression. And it was all about him walking his own way. But you can see within those signatures the trauma and the heaviness, the grief, the deep desire to break free, right? And so those same signatures, which he expressed through creativity, imagine just kind of taking out the creativity. If he didn't play guitar, if he didn't express himself in that way, imagine how addictive and dark those same signatures can be. How like narcissistic and self-focused and victimized that Leo 8th house squaring Mars and Scorpio can be. Alienated, I don't belong. So his soul has been like, I have to belong by just being true to my own vibration. We also have the ruler of the South Node, Uranus in Gemini in the 5th house, squaring the nodes, and the South Node's in Aquarius in the 2nd house, which is sort of that self-reliant, innovative quality where he can just spend a lot of time alone playing music, didn't really care about fitting in. And that Uranus is that icon. You know, Uranus can very much be representative of changing a social movement or affecting the collective or a zeitgeist. So we have Uranus, Gemini, 5th house, innovative ways to self-actualize. So his chart's so clear and so full of it. But he's an interesting soul because he checked out pretty early.
Yeah.
Left this world pretty early in death, 8th house.
Right.
That it's almost like he came here with this strong impulse to actualize his medicine. And he must have been so intimate with that desire, with that calling for more. And that it's also, you know, good to not have any judgment, that maybe that's what this life was about. You know, his soul may have not intended to stick around much longer.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I remember the last session we did, we were talking a bit about not knowing his limits.
Yeah.
You know, really pushing the limits. That's a Scorpio thing. And,
Yeah.
you know, the tendency to, especially with drugs, you know, you never really know how far is too much. I mean, there's been plenty of people that we've heard about, famous people that have gone, you know, Michael Jackson and Prince. And also when I see Uranus squaring the nodes too, sometimes it can be, you know, it can represent a sudden death, early exit. The nodes are lunar signatures, which can reflect kind of earlier on in your life, younger, not, you know, really come into that later life period. I mean, it's not across the board, so don't get worried if you have that or know somebody, but it can mean that.
Totally.
And also, you know, it's a premature exit in this case. And
good point.
Yeah. And we were talking about, again, I can't remember his name, of course, but the guy who used to take risks with all the wild animals, and he ended up dying swimming with he was
a stingray
in the heart. Literally, I think he had an 8th house Pluto too, and Leo. Is he Australian or New Zealand, from New Zealand or something, that wild animal guy. Anyway, I'll find his name. So in his chart, the same was true. Like he thought he was invincible in a way. You know, like he would never die. Like these animals trusted him so much. And I don't know that Jimi Hendrix felt he was invincible, but you know, just one more. He was a limit pusher. And so I do feel like, you know, he really danced with those limits on the edge of death on more, you know, in recent lives as well. And so there's a lesson around that for him. And I'm sure that when he passed, he was probably hovering in the astral plane going, no, wait, let me get back in, you know, through the plexiglass, just that separation, right? That Uranian separation between Earth and the astral plane. I didn't really mean to go there, you know, kind of.
Interesting.
So
I mean, at the same time, there can be this unconscious death wish here.
Oh yeah, maybe
right. It's like pushing the boundaries points to a part of him that's like also kind of like trying to cross that boundary.
Overwhelmed, and maybe it would be better on the other side, right? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I found this other really wonderful quote from him, which speaks to Chiron and Leo in the 8th house. He says, when the power of love overcomes the love of power, the world will know peace.
Yeah.
You know, that is just perfect for this signature, for this chart. 8th house being one of power versus powerlessness, empowerment, the power of love being Leo, of course, what we do with love, what that can create, and his Sun and Venus new phase in Sag in the 12th. I mean, this is a universal message that he's sending with this quote, but also, gosh, look at that Jupiter moon conjunction too. I mean, just talk about his music just going all over the world and making an imprint. I mean, I feel like it is music that can change people, especially the times that we're living in now. It's going to take these universal voices or universal messages. We need more of that at this moment.
We do. Great. All right, next chart. Yoko Ono.
All right. Well, most people know her story. Of course, she was married to John Lennon, and she experienced her own partner die suddenly. And that is not a square to her nodes, that Chiron. But it is a square to her sun in the 5th house in Aquarius. And, the sudden death of her partner. Now, Chiron in Taurus in the 8th house can also be an energy around her own desire to be powerful, not feeling powerful in her own right. So marrying someone powerful in the music industry, which she also shared as an artist and a musician. Taurus is very much a signature for that, being ruled by Venus, and that Venus being put in the 5th house in Aquarius. Aquarius is ruled by Uranus, which is in her 7th. So here it is. She married somebody very famous, in part in order to become powerful herself. That is definitely, there's a wound around not feeling powerful and wanting to have that power and aligning with someone who has it in order to experience it.
And when you put Taurus in the 8th house, we're looking at, maybe a core wounding around a lack of personal resource. I don't have what it takes to become powerful. And so there can be a deep internal sense of inadequacy, low self-worth, and then that 8th house merging with, the traditional 8th house description, the resources of another, in order to extract that which produces within me a sense of empowerment. In terms of the idea of Chiron being where wounding happens, many souls credit her as breaking up the Beatles. Of course, John Lennon made his own choices, but we see the Chiron and Taurus in the 8th house. The South Node in Virgo in the 11th house can speak to an underlying psychology of inferiority. I'm an outsider in the community. I'm not one of the team. I don't belong. And during the last years of the Beatles, she was hanging out with them in the studio. No one really liked her. She was taking a lot of John's energy. And so there was sort of a sense of her having this perpetual dynamic in her own life journey of being the outsider. And that Chiron in Taurus in the 8th house can be a stubbornness. I'm going to be stubborn and stable and powerful, but actually underneath that, very, very vulnerable. And I think her own vulnerability of not feeling powerful and not feeling esteemed, Taurus's song, Taurus's voice. And so there are many people who really love her music, but she definitely never compared to the genius and to the creativity and the imprint that John Lennon made with his music.
Yeah. And just in alignment with, or aligning with that Scorpio 8th house Taurian energy. Every picture we see of her, she's wearing black typically. Black, dark glasses, black hats, black outfits. And listen to this. There's a song she sings, or I don't know if she probably wrote it, called Coffin Car. Like a coffin. And she says, half the world is dead anyway. The other half is asleep. She sings on Coffin Car. And life is killing her, telling her to join the dead. These are her lyrics. And so I think that just like coffin, I think of the 8th house, of course.
Absolutely.
So there's just a real shadow element to her artistry. And, also very much, a lot of what was written about, and again, speculation, we don't know for sure, but actually some of it's not speculation, because there's a picture of her that I had seen where it says, yes, I am a witch, is what she'll say. So there's this speculation that she was into black magic, and they're into all sorts of voodoo types of things. It's very much an eighth house kind of area of interest, I would say. And so a lot of that, a lot of people felt that her influence and connection with people that had that kind of dark power might have just led them astray to some degree, and might have been integral in what ultimately happened to John. But there's nothing proven about that. It's just, part of what they were getting mixed up with. And, he was getting mixed up in it too, as a result of being with her. And then the question becomes, why did he attract her? What is that about? And we shared in the last one, that last bit, that there is a giant thread on the message board where we got into Yoko Ono and John Lennon's chart, their relationship. So if you're interested in reading about that, you can find that on the message board, schoolofevolutionaryastrology.com, and click on the message board and just drop in their names in the search engine, and you should find it. But it's extensive. Many of us.
Yeah, really interesting.
Long thread on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have this Venus in Aquarius in the 5th house, and it's the ruler of her Chiron. And so this will actually tell us a little bit about how she was in relationship to this Chiron signature, to this wound, to that relationship, to that almost that deep sense of loss and darkness that she's coming to terms with. It's through her own creativity. And that Venus in a new phase with Saturn and Pallas Athene is very much this desire to make her mark in the world as her own independent artist. She was avant-garde. She wanted to stand out. But it's very interesting where you can see the relationship between that 5th house Aquarius and that Chiron in the 8th house, where it's like the need to individuate and to be different, to stand out, to become her own individual, that there was an underlying desire and need within that to extract power, to affirm her own self-worth, her own sense of value in life and society. And the North Node itself being in Pisces in the 5th house, of course, there's an underlying soul directive. She wants to shine. She wants to express. But that dichotomy between that Virgo 11th of I'm an outsider, I don't belong, and that Pisces 5th house, which is I'm special, I'm important, I'm carrying something meaningful and important for the masses. So we just really see how this soul was really on her own journey, wanting to bring herself out more. And one way or another, that Chiron and Taurus in the 8th, which it doesn't square the nodes, but to me, it's approaching it. It has that vibe of moving towards it, where there is a level of volatility or sort of potential in that signature. It's conjunct Vesta, which is squaring the nodes. It's in the vibration of it. It's moving towards. So there's something about that energy, one way or another, where there is an underlying intention and directive on a soul level to ultimately unearth and connect with a deeply seated sense of unworthiness and not belonging. And I think the extent to which she has or hasn't touched base with that also reflects the extent to which medicine is produced and shared with the world. Because the ultimate power of Taurus in the 8th house is the ability to show up in one's wholeness, even though you don't feel whole. It's having a relationship and the humility of being in touch with one's sense of brokenness and still showing up regardless. Otherwise, it can just sort of be hidden and, moving towards others to replace one sense of wholeness if it's not coming from the inside.
Right. Very much so. We talked last time briefly too about that the two of them bringing the television cameras into their bedroom.
Yeah.
Right. So for the whole world to see, this space of intimacy, the ruler of that Chiron in the 8th is in the 5th house, right? It's like their bedroom becomes a stage.
Nice.
Right. And, why do you think she wanted to do that? That their whole message was about wanting world peace, right? It's the way that they kind of platform that. But in my eyes, it's like she wanted the world to know, I don't know, is this something like she has something to prove or something? You know what I mean? Like I can't explain it. I can't put words to it so much, but yeah, it's definitely something to prove or something that she wanted to communicate there.
Right.
He's mine.
Totally. And it could be a combination of both, but absolutely.
Yeah.
And that moon and Sag in the third house wearing the nodes speaks to that, relative to that Pisces fifth house and Neptune and Virgo on the south node. It's like that desire for publicity and to be sharing a message, and not necessarily having any tact in regards to how this message is being shared, and any kind of unresolved piece around her own sense of belonging. But at the same time, that very moon does carry a message. There is potentially something healing with Jupiter ruling that in Virgo in the 12th house that becomes universal. And there are qualities to her work in her life that has been a part of a universal message of peace and inclusion. So those qualities are definitely a part of her journey that she did with John.
But that, that bedroom scene now, like what I really wanted to say and I couldn't put words to is like, I am equally famous.
Oh, yeah.
It's like that two people in the bed, we are equally famous now, as
right.
that, and that's just the part that kind of rubs me funny,
Right, and that Chiron ruled by Venus with Saturn is that desire for status.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, to be a part of the group, to be a part of the band, to be one of them.
Right.
Yeah.
Recognition and reputation, and reaching that higher level, like summiting in a sense.
Right.
All right.
And ultimately Pluto in the 10th house as the bottom line, so it makes a lot of sense.
So when we talk about how that Chiron wounds others, you spoke about it earlier, again, talking about how Beatles felt she contributed to the breakup of the band, and her role in John's life, everything kind of went south from there. So that would be the wounding of others, the ruler being in the 5th house in Aquarius, the separation, right? The breaking up, Aquarius, there is how one way of how she wounded others. And also I would say if there is definitely a dark element that she's very open about. And you think about dark energy in general, Aquarius, when somebody harnesses that energy, Aquarius carries an incredible amount of speed. It is a catalyst. It's like lightning. And so if you direct your energy in a certain way and you have a strong Aquarian chart, your ability to manifest something has ripping speed. And like, was it What the Bleep, that movie that came out? It was all about manifesting. It's like if you think something positive, you can. It spoke a great deal about what happens when you tune in to something with your mind, with intention, with desire, and directing that energy in a certain way, what can happen for you in your life. And it's a true thing. I mean, not everything we think about can manifest exactly how we wish. I mean, there are limits to that for all people, depending on the soul and what they've come here to do. But we all know that when we focus on something, when we have a desire and attention, then things can start to happen with our efforts. But with the Aquarian element, and when you're aligning with a more powerful energy, good or bad, it has an effect. And there's speed to it. There's a speed to it that's stunning.
Indeed. Beautiful.
All right.
Great.
Move on.
Marilyn Manson. So,
all right.
I shared this last time, but no one heard it. So I really enjoyed researching this chart. Oftentimes before a class, I'll just spend time with like one person and watch a lot of interviews and YouTube videos, and very interesting soul. So he actually grew up in a very religious Christian environment, and at some point the teacher said to the kids, here is an example of the music you shouldn't listen to. And they shared like some kind of like death metal music or something like that. And immediately he was like, that's the music I need to listen to. So it's deeply, deeply drawn to rebel, to not give in to the rules. And if you look at the chart, it's really interesting what all this is about. So not what you would expect at first. South Node in Libra in the second, conjunct Uranus and Jupiter. He has a song called Beautiful People. And how he kind of makes fun or criticizes consumer culture and fake beauty and things like that. It's ruled in conjunct Venus in Pisces in the 7th house. So this is a soul that has definitely been in prior lives a part of the church, being in sort of a very pure, peaceful, pristine, loving, beautiful kind of context. You could imagine him being a part of a boys' choir, singing in a church and all those kinds of things. But this Venus is in Pisces, innocent. It's ruled by Neptune in the 4th. It's squaring Neptune in Scorpio in the 4th. So we see the violation of the innocent here, where this innocent purity of giving and harmony and sharing and beauty has been violated by darkness and manipulative forces in the world. So there's something, when we look at the 8th house, North Node conjunct Chiron, we have a little bit of context for what the soul is trying to integrate. Because that North Node in Aries in the 8th, which is ruled by Mars and Scorpio in the 3rd house, is saying, okay, connect with your own desires, your own will, the grit of your own personal ambition and desires and what you want to affirm and assert as your own individual being. And 8th house, Aries, like, are just volatile when you put them together. It's like the opposite of peaceful, beautiful, graceful Libra in the 2nd. And it's all about awakening the pure masculine drive and expression of the soul itself. Just that pure, like, rage and energy as a way to really connect with his own depths. There's a lot of repressed anger and desires that are in there. We have Saturn in Aries in the 9th. It rules and it squares the sun in Capricorn in the 5th. So here's this thing around, like, okay, I'm not going to follow the rules. I'm going to find my own authority. I'm going to define my own cosmology and understand this soul is, you know, 2nd individuated, probably moving into 3rd in terms of his own evolutionary journey. So at that stage, there's a need to totally reject any kind of external authority figures that say what's right, what's ethical, what's wrong, to really determine that within himself. So defining his own philosophy on life has been really important. So he studied a lot of occult stuff. He was really into Aleister Crowley and some of the darker magic type things. But he's been through these phases in his life where he, at some point, was married. He actually asked someone to marry him. She rejected him. The pain of that rejection was so deep. I mean, look at this pure soul. Pisces in the 7th house, Libra, Sagittarius, like his self-worth and self-esteem so wrapped up in other people and being liked and being pleasing. It's like so deep for this soul. But he had to process his aloneness, Aries in the 8th house. So this Pisces conjunct the North Node, ruled by Neptune in the 4th in Scorpio, is this deep penetrating wound into the fertile empty void of his own lostness, this chasm of despair and emptiness, that there's no hope for salvation because everything is going down. So he cut himself several times. He made art all over his wall, just purging, expressing, moving. But this is a great example of a soul that's actually fertilizing that energy, right? Like you listen to him talk, you could tell he's in a journey, he's in a process. Like he's not going to stop where he is. You can feel that in his soul.
Hey Ari, when you said that he made, I remember this from before, and I want to know if I heard you clearly. When he made art on his wall after cutting himself, was he using his own blood to make?
I don't remember. I don't know.
That's what it sounded like when you said it, and I was just wondering.
I don't think that's true. I don't know.
Was the art about him cutting himself?
No, the art was just a part of the process. Like he wrote a lot of lyrics, a lot of messages on the wall. There are pictures of it that you can see. One thing he wrote on the wall, as I recall, which became a lyric, maybe this, I may not have this right in terms of the order, but one way or another, it's a lyric in one of his songs is, whatever doesn't kill you leaves a wound.
Right. Look at
And
that
that,
Mars in Scorpio squaring Mercury in the 6th in Aquarius. That
mhm.
literally could be using his own blood to create art right there.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Sure he did.
Yeah. Well, and this, how beautifully that lyric speaks to that Chiron, like, whatever doesn't kill you, 8th house, leaves a wound, Chiron.
Oh my gosh,
And for
yeah.
him to transmute that into art, and what his art did is it became collective. It's like it speaks to the masses. He's a voice for many people who feel disenfranchised, ways to process and purge and move through their own phases of darkness. There's an interesting quote that I have here. Let me show you. I love this quote. I was married once, and I wanted gay people to understand that they can suffer too if they get married. That was his response when he was explaining, like, the only time he actually voted was when he voted for Obama, because he really wanted to support gay rights, because he wanted them to also know that they can also suffer if they got married. And I think that's great. He's donated to a lot of charities. He's worked with Make-A-Wish Foundation to collaborate with a fan who had been diagnosed with a life-threatening illness. 16-year-old boy from Tennessee was invited to the band's recording studio to record backing vocals for their then upcoming album. Yesterday, I spent the afternoon with this boy, Andrew, who reminded me that the things I create are only made complete by those who enjoy them. I just want to simply say thank you to Andrew so much for sharing such an important wish with me. He contributed to another album which raised money to aid victims of domestic and sexual abuse. Think of that, Neptune in the 4th house in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. He has supported various organizations such as Music for Life and Little Kids Rock, which enable access to musical instruments and education to children of low-income families. He has also worked with Project Nightlight, a group that encourages children and teenagers to speak out against physical and sexual abuse. So that's a beautiful...
yeah. You know what? I wanted you to share something else that you had mentioned about. There's all these. Really, I mean, he's such a voice for waking up the world in his own way, and for all of those who feel different like he does. But
Yeah.
you said he had been blamed for some deaths because of the shooting, the Columbine shooting, because of the nature of what would go on at his concerts or something?
No, because people believe, I don't know if it's literally true, but the shooters were dressed up like him.
Oh, right. Mm-hmm.
And so that was really devastating for his own self-image. And as a result, though, he got involved in the lives of many of the victims of people who've lost people and actually engaged in their life. So look at this, Ceres in Capricorn in the 5th house.
Mm-hmm.
This is his concern with children in setting up safe refuges and charity and organizations that support children empowerment and music for children. This is a part of his journey. And I think a lot of this is healing where his own inner child, his own innocence in the past has been violated by what? Aries in the 9th house. I mean, this dogmatic, hypocritical, religious authoritarianism that was actually more harmful than good. So this is this really beautiful part of his own journey and defining his own sense of morality and ethics in the world. At the same time, there is this piece for him coming to terms with where he does create wounding for other people. Like there's an image where he paints really beautifully too, like really surreal. And there's an image where after Trump was elected, where he painted a picture of a man with a red tie who was beheaded. And people were asking him, so was that Trump? He's like, I'm not saying it was. It's just what it is. I'm not interpreting it. And he's done things like that are sort of like an indirect citing of violence, but he's not claiming responsibility for it. So it's like in his processing of this Chiron energy, there is this dark energy that comes through that can influence people in very negative ways, even though he himself isn't going to act violently. There's something in his own processing that can actually create wounding and send a message of violence to other people. And I think that's a part of him. I just see that as a part of his own he asked, how do you feel about taking on the name of Manson, a murderer?
Right.
And his response was, I never met the guy. I don't know what he did. I don't know. And it's like that kind of response is sort of a disconnect.
Yeah. So does he say why he picked that name?
Oh yeah, it's interesting. He picked Marilyn Manson. He says it was like bells. I don't know the phrasing, but when he thought of it, it was like everything felt right about it. Marilyn being this, icon, this popular, social icon, and Manson being this popular villain icon. And there's something about Marilyn Manson's music and his work and his art that really kind of shatters and breaks down the cultural value and praise of these larger than life icons that we think of as so important. And, like we live by them and we embody them and value them and worship them in one way or another, infamous or famous. And I think it's a part of what he was sort of poking at. That's my general sense of it from what I've read.
Uh-huh. He painted a picture of Jesus Christ.
Uh-huh.
That is unbelievable. I mean, think about that. Like, someone might be surprised about that, but
I want to see it.
I'm going to try and actually, I'm going to send it to you and you can post it here.
You can actually,
share my screen.
Yeah, you can share it. I'll unshare and then you can share. Yeah.
Okay, hang on just a second. Don't share it yet.
I won't share it yet. So,
all right.
Also, just noting he has Leo moon in the 12th house as well. And that's a part of that innocence and that need to merge and kind of connect with a deeper transcendental expression of his own creativity, of his own eternal innocence, and also that love for youth and children.
Okay. All right.
You got it?
I found it.
All right, I'm going to stop my share. Now, you can just click share and specifically click the window that you want to share. Whoa. He did that?
Yeah.
Wow. Marilyn Manson drew that? That's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I clicked on his art and it says Marilyn Manson's Jesus Christ.
Beautiful. Will you scroll down a little bit? Is there any more to it?
There's like a watermark.
Yeah.
His neck even. That's just an amazing picture.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I mean, I've seen some of his other art. It's profound. Really beautiful. Like, look at those eyes. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
You think about, why would he want to draw Jesus Christ? And I don't have the chart up because I've got this up. But what does he have in Pisces again? Mars? Or no, that's Scorpio.
In Pisces, 7th house, Venus.
Yeah. And then he's got moon in the 12th house. So I think of Christ, when I think of Christ, I do think of a Pisces, that stellium of Pisces that he has. And I believe he has a south node in Scorpio, right?
South node in Libra.
Jesus Christ does?
Oh, Jesus, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, south node in Scorpio on the 11th.
Yeah. And so Marilyn Manson has his Mars on Christ's south node, and Marilyn Manson's Venus sits right in Christ, the stellium of planets he has in Pisces. So this sacrificing yourself for the greater whole kind of thing, that message.
Yeah. Cool.
Even like you said, his connection to the church early on, like these lifetimes that you had talked about before, about perhaps being a priest or a monk or something, with that strong second house signature. You had talked about that, I think, in our last show.
That's right, yeah.
All right, I love this picture. So go ahead and I'll give it back to you.
You can unshare.
Let's see here. I've got to.
It should be on the top of your screen, the option to unshare. If you like kind of click the icon. There we go. All right. So yeah, that feels good for Marilyn. Bruce Lee. It's funny, last class, I feel like we were just, it was like an hour and a half and we were just going really slow because we did this already that I'm kind of like moving through it.
Yeah, right.
Bruce Lee's a really cool example. So, he actually created his own martial art form. Notice this is Chiron, Pluto in Aries, sorry, in Leo in the 8th, a lot like Jimi Hendrix. Also has Mars and Scorpio in the 11th, squaring this Chiron. So he's all about evolving, and this is a great example. We can cross-reference two different souls. He had this amazing and powerful creative imprint on the world and very much revolutionized martial arts and developed a practice that he, and I don't remember what it was called, but his whole philosophy was simplifying it, like taking away all the different rituals and all the other stuff and kind of getting to the core. So really refining 11th house Mars Scorpio. It's like that pure, higher warrior intelligence. So the energies are really clear and sharp, really essential. You spoke about thought as 11th house in Aquarius, saying, so you have Mars and Scorpio in the 11th house is a very highly keen, developed, instinctive, physical capacity. And squaring and ruled by Pluto with Chiron in Aries, in Leo in the 8th house, this is a soul that was deeply driven to access greater depths of personal empowerment, greater depths of personal creative actualization. And you can imagine how deeply concentrated he was to train to the extent that he did, to cultivate himself and to have actualized himself in all the ways that he did. And he didn't live very long at all. He didn't live beyond a few decades or so in this lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
Were there other things that you had to say about it?
I don't think I talked about him, but how old was he when he died?
Yeah, I have a Word document, actually, I'm remembering. Let me look for it. He was young.
I mean, look at that Chiron and Leo squaring Venus and Mars in the 11th house. And he died suddenly, right? Like, how did he die again?
I don't remember. I remember now. He was having migraines, and at some point he had this headache, and someone gave him this painkiller, and apparently whatever was in it had a very negative effect with something else, and he died. But it was all, Mars in the 11th, brain swelling.
Yeah, totally. And it's balsamic to Venus there. And even that Pluto squaring the moon in the 12th in Scorpio. Again, it's like goes back to this drug thing, like just, this strong Piscean influence with some of these other charts, or the Jimi Hendrix, thinking about Jackson or Prince, just going a little too far, this limit pushing kind of energy around even.
And I don't think he had a drug issue.
Not he himself, but the medication didn't respond right to his body.
Exactly.
And, I just love this chart too for his ability with his body and the martial arts piece, right? It's so Scorpio as well. That's, independent of how he made his exit, but just taking things to a whole nother level, right? In this life, even though it was short. I thought he was like in his 30s or 40s when he passed.
30s, yeah. Here, so Lee emphasized what he called the style of no style. This consisted of getting rid of the formalized approach, which Lee claimed was indicative of traditional styles. Lee felt that even the system he now called the style of no style was too restrictive, and it eventually evolved into a philosophy and martial art he would come to call the way of the intercepting fist. It is a term he would later regret, because the way of the intercepted fist implied specific parameters that style connote, whereas his idea of martial arts was to exist outside of parameters and limitations. So that right there is a part of where he innovated and brought so much to the world, but it's also where he was facing his own psychological limitations. And he pushed himself. So I don't know the physiology, but it's clear from his chart that he pushed himself so deeply, so much,
Mm-hmm.
And the question remains is like, what was he actually capable of containing and holding?
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the downfalls of the 11th house in general, where we can become arrogant about our human limitations and think that with our mind we can go beyond all obstacles.
Right. I mean, we talked about that with Jimi Hendrix and with, the crocodile Dundee guy.
Right.
That Saturn in Taurus in retrograde in the 5th, opposing Venus and Mars, Moon, right? Saturn rules the second house cusp, so it's like pushing the body beyond its limits, in that way. Right. Again, thinking that you can, like, just not being able to even know how far you can go before something snaps.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Honorable mention, Robert.
Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead. Yeah, no, I was remembering his name was Steve. That's all I can remember. It's going to kill me here. This keeps circling back to that guy that was killed with the stingray in the heart. Steve. Does that ring a bell now?
You should look it up.
I'm gonna look it up. You
Yeah.
talk about Robert Downey Jr.
Just an honorable mention. We have a soul that struggled with a lot of addiction, and we have Saturn now involved with Pisces in the 8th house, squaring the node. So this is sort of a soul that definitely was facing like Sag South node in the 5th house, fun, adventure, creativity, like total expansion. Pisces and Saturn, Chiron in the 8th is dealing with an existential void through addiction and escapism. And so part of his healing journey, and he's been doing really well, has been coming to terms with his own escapism, his own addiction. And I think through that, there's a lot of empathy and medicine and healing that he's connecting with. And also it's sort of like through his struggle, through his whole life, I think his own struggle with addiction has really had a deep impact on his own career as an amazing actor. So just want to share that.
Okay, so the guy's name is Steve Irwin.
Oh, okay. Was he called a crocodile hunter or like something like that?
I said Crocodile Dundee, but that's right. I think Crocodile Hunter, I think that's right. I'm going to look at his chart real quick before we go, because I'm wondering if he has Chiron in the 8th house too, just so people can check that chart out.
Do it.
I got everybody here.
I'll look up the lyrics to Beautiful People by Marilyn Manson.
Really, yeah, that's good. Of course,
And I don't need you. Don't bother to resist or I'll beat you. It's not your fault that you're always wrong. The weak ones are there to justify the strong. The beautiful people. It's all relative to the size of your steeple. You can't see the forest for the trees. You can't smell your own shit on your knees. There's no time to discriminate. Hate every motherfucker that's in your way. Hey, you, what do you see? Something beautiful or something free? Hey, you, are you trying to be mean? If you live with apes, man, it's hard to be clean. The worms will live in every host. It's hard to pick which ones to eat the most. It's horrible people, the horrible people. It's an anatomic as the size of your steeple. Capitalism has made its way. Old-fashioned fascism will take it away. Hey, you, what do you see? Something beautiful or something free? Hey, you, are you trying to be mean? If you live with apes, man, it's hard to be clean. The beautiful people, ah. The beautiful people, ah. Anyway, that's powerful. Holy moly!
Wow,
that's beautiful and powerful.
My favorite line is, "You can't smell the shit on your knees." I think, but
yeah,
that was incredible.
Yeah.
So back to Steve Irwin. I mean, he has an 8th house Pluto in Libra. Sorry, 8th house Pluto in Virgo, opposing Venus and Pisces in the 2nd. And Chiron, so his Pluto is in Virgo in the 8th, and his Venus is in Pisces in the 2nd, which is opposing that Pluto with Chiron in the 2nd.
Oh, okay.
Again, in the sea, he died in the sea. I realize we're not doing a show on Pisces right now, but he has an 8th house Pluto as a Scorpio signature, and it's conjunct Uranus in Leo, the 7th. But anyway, that he's got Mars on the South node in Aquarius, which again, this is not the first time he's been pushing those limits, but he died in the sea, Pisces, as life ended suddenly with Mars on the South node in Aquarius. This has been a repeating theme of pushing limits. It's a Scorpio phenomenon for sure, and knowing when not to go too far. All right, that was an awesome show. Better than
Well,
even last time, I think, but not as good as you weren't here with me.
yeah,
But it was more fun last time, I think, is having you
yeah,
here. But I'm hopefully
yeah, that
people
was fun.
hear us clearly and learned a lot today. And we'll be back with Ari Moshe next month looking at Chiron in Sagittarius or the ninth house. Awesome. Until then, thanks for joining us. Namaste.